options today that we're going to taste through, all of which are incredibly challenging to find. So this is a really exciting tasting. I have worked with all these producers before, but some of these wines I've never had the opportunity to taste because we get such tiny, tiny amounts into the state. So I guess I'll kick it off with our first one. So Weiße Künstler, the Trabacher. So Weiße Künstler is a very, very tiny domain. They only have 4 hectares. That is essentially like 10 acres. So their production is tiny, and that's for everything that they produce. And in that tiny amount of space, they've got 3 Grand Cru plots, and then some village wine, which is like right below Grand Cru. And it's just a husband and wife team. They are on extremely steep slopes. They hand harvest everything. They let the native ambient yeast ferment it, and all of these 3 producers do. And so it's amazing because each year will vary a little bit. So each vintage is kind of exciting to see like what that vintage is like. I will say in the Mosel, which has historically been one of the coldest growing wine regions in the world, we're getting vintages, better and better vintages just almost every year because the average temperature has been increasing over the past like 20 years. So you're starting to see more ripe vintages. But interestingly, about 35 to 40 years ago, probably 15% of German wine was dry, so the opposite of sweet. Now 50% of German wine is dry. So it's definitely a direction people are going. I just think the interest in dry wine is more so than before when people were maybe drinking more sweet wine historically. We're starting to see a little bit more exciting dry wines and really amazing dry wines. So Riesling, of course, has followed, being the queen of German wine. And so we have today 3 dry Rieslings and 1 off-dry Riesling. So Weiße Künstler, this first one, Trabacher. This is one of their, like, I would say village wine, but because they're like so specific, it almost sounds bad to say that. But it's not one of their Grand Cru. It's still like really, really exceptional, and would be considered Grand Cru by anyone else's standards. So I love this. It's really expressive. Something that I get from dry Riesling sometime, and especially on this one, is like, ever like open a pack of Skittles and smell it? It's like that like fruity, lemony flavor going on. And it's before you like bite into the Skittle and actually get all the sweetness. So I always get that on it. German wine, dry Riesling, and any of their dry wines, because they're generally higher in acid, because it's so cold there, the grapes need acid to just survive, always pair so well with food. And the saltier and fattier the food, the better. My favorite pairing ever is probably fried pickles and Riesling. And it's by no means uber classy. It's not caviar, but it is like one of the best things you can possibly do for yourself. So if you have a chance, but really amazing wine, and they make tiny amounts of it. And Weiße Künstler is just, they're stewards of the land, and there's no sprays, there's no additives, there's nothing. It's just like crushed grapes, and they do as much as possible to take care of these grapes and then turn it into great wine. I love that. Jen, should we kind of like cruise through them and then?
Yeah, whatever you feel is the appropriate. Yeah. Yep. Does anybody have any questions about this? What do you guys think of it? Do you guys get that like right here in the back, that crazy acid? It's hard to see you guys because you've got just profile pics up, so.
Another, when you're tasting wine, something that someone like broke down for me that really opened my eyes because I had trouble telling the difference between tannin and acid. When you drink wine and your mouth feels dry, that's from the tannin. When you drink a wine and you salivate, that's from the acid. So these wines are really, really high acid. What's interesting about the Mosel, you've got this river with very steep sides to it. And the reason that you can grow grapes there, despite it being cold, one, you have to pick the correct varietal, the correct like grape. So they do Riesling because Riesling has a ton of acid and that keeps them warm when it's so cold. But on these slopes, the river running through it keeps the air kind of moving a little bit so frost can't settle. And then also on the slope, you've got the sun coming in directly on the grape, like any other grape, but also it reflects off the water. Like, because, you know, we're in a snowy climate, if you're ever in the mountains and like that, like sun is glaring off the snow, it's the same thing. So the grapes are getting a tiny bit more heat, tiny bit more light. And it seems minimal, but in such a cold region, that like little tiny amount makes a huge difference. If it's 20 minutes more a day of enough growing like warm weather, but every day for the entire growing season, it makes a difference in the ripeness of the grape. And it has been really hard to get grapes ripe. And especially Weissenkunsle, they're really interesting. They sought out parcels that had been forgotten about. So little tiny like vineyards that people had once farmed historically and then left because maybe only 2 out of 10 vintages turned out okay because it couldn't get ripe enough. As the climate has increased, they went and sought these out. So now they're getting these parcels that have these really, really old vines. Some of their vines, 110 years, which is insane to think that a little grapevine is still producing wine after that long. So it's really fun. If you're a nerd, I guess.
Sorry, I keep, because so that we're not echoing, I keep turning both my mute and my, anyway. Jessica and Brandon want to know what a foeder cask is, if you can explain that a little bit.
Pardon?
It's in the chat. Can you see it? Can you see
Foeder are these like really huge, big oak barrels. I mean, they're so big, you literally put a bed into them. And Alsace is probably the region that is most famous for these casks. And they're huge. And the bigger the barrel, the less the barrel imparts, like the barrel flavor imparts onto the wine. So like, you have like a tiny barrel and there's more surface area touching the wine. And so these huge barrels, they are breathable and then they're also less contact with the wine, so they're less impact on the flavor. And realistically, some of these are used for so long. Some of them you like crack open, they've been used for like 30, 40, 50 years. You crack them open, they look like a geode, because all the sulfuric acid has created these crystals all around it. So realistically, the wine never is touching the barrel. And it's pretty, I mean, it's really a beautiful thing. I'm supposed to open the chat window. Sorry, I'm learning. And yes, the slate soil also traps the heat. So in the Mosel, you get a lot of slate soils. There's mostly slate, which is where the Riesling is grown, and then a little bit of limestone pushed up from like the Paris wine basin. That's like the same soil you see in Burgundy into Champagne, and then all the way through the Mosel. So you will you'll get these little limestone pockets. Limestone generally makes your wine really acidic, so it's hard to put Riesling on that in an area that's so cold. So Elbling, which is a super ancient grape that's been in the Mosel for 2,000 years, they've almost isolated, like Elbling goes onto the limestone and then Riesling goes onto the slate. That is helpful. Yeah, let's move to, yeah, I will explain how special the river is in growing the grapes. So the river, the Mosel River has cut like really deep. It's almost like Grand Canyon-esque, and it causes these big turns. And so whenever you have a turn that faces the south, it creates like these big amphitheaters. And when it creates a slope that faces the south, that's where like the best wines and the best grapes can be grown. And often where it doesn't face south, you just can't grow anything, is there's just not enough warmth and not enough sunlight. And so in a region that would otherwise be inhospitable to growing grapes or getting them ripe enough, this river does that. And it's certainly a labor of love. The slopes are so steep that you're hand picking all the grapes. Sometimes you have to clip in just to sit there and pick the grapes so you don't fall off the side, which is pretty amazing that we're getting to taste something that the grapes were planted so long ago. They're hand picked. There's just like so much care and attention that goes into all these. So, and talking about pairings, Riesling and sushi, one of my absolute favorites. Riesling and any spicy food, amazing. I particularly like Riesling and charcuterie because I like that like fatty, salty, savory going with my Riesling. Yeah. So we can move on to the next one. Stein. Uli Stein is kind of a hippie meets narcissist. And I say narcissist because I can't understand why someone would put so much devotion into something and he doesn't even charge for what it costs and what he does and the amount of labor that goes into something. He just produces it and it covers his costs and it covers his living style, which is he has a little not a little house, but a house in the mountains, or the hills, I should say, compared to Colorado. What? Oh, Inn. It's called the Inn. Yes, it's called the Inn. But he lives very humbly and he works really hard and he makes these exceptional wines. So Palmberg is so steep that he had to terrace it, and they had to, it's like hand-built walls, like no machinery can get anywhere near this, and so it just took a tremendous amount of work. The vines are 90 plus years old, which you think you literally plant something 90 years ago and now we get to reap the benefits of it. And he makes these exceptional wines, and Palmberg is one of his most, I guess, sought after. These kind of are cult wines when you start, if you're in Europe. A lot of people know about it. Something little less known in the US, but I think we're just starting to get our feet wet in the dry Riesling realm. But fair, because they were sending us a bunch of garbage for so long. I tell my mom I love dry Riesling and she just is like, ew, blue nun? Like, no, not that. Very different. So, but the Palmberg vineyard, they say his style is more of a whisper than a roar, and it just kind of like takes you along. I think on this one, you see the textural difference between the first one. And it's just got it's a little more ripe. More recent vintages just have been more ripe, which is exciting. And he's just making some amazing things. Can I mention the GG 18er? Jen? I don't know. Anyways, if you have a chance just to Google the Palmberg vineyard, it's like really unbelievable. First GG. Oh, okay. So we're talking about I'm sorry, I'm like really terrible at technology. So GG is sort of like Grand Cru. We hear Grand Cru because we hear, you know, Burgundy, which is probably the most famous wine growing region in the world, and they have rated their stuff Grand Cru, Premier Cru, village level, and so GG is essentially the equivalent in Germany, and that is actually made by a group of the German wine system for rating their wines and talking about wines is so complicated, which I think has pushed people away a little bit. They want to give you like, they put on the label like how ripe grape was at harvest, but it doesn't tell you how much sugar is in the glass now. It's so complicated. So now there's a group that got together and they wanted to like rate things and say, okay, like this is like a GG and this is like Grand Cru. So Germany in general has been trying to make a classification system that would be easy, except there's like 4 different groups that are trying to make a classification system to make it easy. So it's become less easy. 2 things you can always look at on a label. Does it say Trocken? Then it's dry. There's like 3 grams of sugar or less. Or does it say fine herb? And that means that it's slightly sweet. So those are 2 giveaways. And sometimes you just have to taste it. Otherwise you start looking at like, if it says Cabinet or Spoutlesen, Auslesen, and then you have to look at the residual or the sugar on it or the alcohol on it, and then start to deduct. It gets wild. If you like dry Riesling, just always go for Trocken. You'll be happy. And if you like something a little sweet, then you will get something just a touch sweet. You'll look at fine herb. US Rieslings rarely say sweetness level. That's true. I think in the United States, we got really caught up in labeling varietally, like what grape it is, and that was supposed to indicate what it meant. So most people start to go into the, like they make it sweet because in people's mind, they've had Riesling before, it's sweet. And so breaking out of that, like Pinot Noir from Willamette Valley and Pinot Noir from Southern California are so different, but we put the same Pinot Noir on the label. It doesn't tell us anything as a consumer, and it's challenging. Whereas like maybe in Europe, it'll say, you know, a Pinot Noir from the Loire Valley, it'll just say like where it's from in the Loire, and you'll kind of gather like it's going to be high acid, less fruit forward. And then like Pinot Noir in Burgundy, it'll just say Burgundy, and you know it's going to be really expensive and probably delicious. But yeah, you're definitely right. It doesn't label sweetness, but I don't think the Germans have done a great job of labeling sweetness because it doesn't necessarily mean what's in the bottle. So.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to keep throwing you off, but because it can be sweet or dry up until Cabinet, right? And it's only like Trockenbeer and Auslese that you know for sure it's sweet, which is also impossible to buy, but whatever.
Well, so yes and no. So if we look at the which one is my, oh, this Palmberg is actually Spoutlese. So it's supposed to be like even sweeter. It goes like Cabinet, Auslese, and Spoutlese, Auslese. So this should technically be really sweet, but he made the decision to ferment it all the way dry. So as you see, they don't make it easy. I think that if you put Trocken on the label, that gives you a little hint. And that's what this one says. So if you're thinking about, if you look at the alcohol level, this is what I will do sometimes because I don't know every wine and I haven't tasted every wine. If I go in and I flip the label around and it says 13% alcohol, my assumption is because it's from the Mosel, my assumption is that it's going to be pretty dry because they fermented it all the way to 13%. If it said something like 8%, I would know there's probably some sweetness on it because they stopped the fermentation for one reason or another. So, anyways, let's go to the second Weisskunstler. So Weisskunstler has 3 essentially Grand Cru, and the Steffensburg is one of them. And they've made 70 cases came to the United States, so less than 2 cases per state, so really tiny amounts. This is where you see that Riesling is not always sweet. I mean, this is like ripping acidity to it. And this to me screams for like a little food to go with it, because that like acidity, you want to put that acidity work. I'm gonna taste it too. So I love that Jen described this as garden hose, because I describe it in a very different way, but she's 100% spot on as well. She called it garden hose. And when you smell it, it's got that thing. In all my wine classes, everyone talks about Riesling. They're always like, yeah, it's petrol, it's petrol, it's petrol. I don't know if I ever got like gasoline, except from very old Riesling. But in this, if you think about smelling a jar of petroleum jelly and then smelling this, I completely get it. It smells like petroleum jelly. It's pretty zippy, it's pretty aggressive. It's something that, I don't know, it's making me salivate. I just am like, I need charcuterie. Or I mentioned sushi earlier. The vinegar that goes into sushi rice sometimes makes that a really challenging pairing for things, because vinegar and wine are hard to pair. This is such high acidity, it'll like rip right through it. It's like great. It won't be bothered at all by the vinegar. And it'll cleanse your palate and make every bite kind of taste like new when you're eating something. But yeah, pretty amazing that this this gets so dry. And I think the alcohol, 12.5%. So you can see if you're like looking. Jen, yeah, garden hose. I love the smell on this. Yeah, it's got a pretty long finish. It kind of has like a spiciness to it. And I don't know, it's definitely stands out from the last 2, I feel, that we tasted as far as flavor profile. All right. What do we think? Are we ready to move to the next one? I don't want to rush anyone in their drinking. Oh yeah, we had we made buffalo chicken quesadillas tonight, and these wines are like super amazing with that. But it's like what is a pre-fermentation cold soak? So they take the grapes and they soak them. Grapes generally, when you're crushing them cooler, are better, because when you do crush them, the fermentation will go slowly. So you often see people harvest at night. I have a few producers I work with, especially in like warmer, like in Spain, they'll harvest at night because it's the coldest, and when the grapes are cooler and you start to crush them, the fermentation will start a little more slowly and evenly. And having that temperature consistency is good. When the grapes get too hot, when you're fermenting, they'll start to produce like ester, like smells and flavors that are kind of like berry fruity. Sometimes, like, have you ever had Beaujolais that tastes like banana strawberry yogurt. It's because they want to do a really quick fermentation, so they like make it a hotter fermentation, and you'll smell banana. The first time you like smell it and think about it, you'll never be able to let it go. There's some Beaujolais I can never drink again because all I taste and smell is banana. But all right, so Uligan Hart. Oh, there's a question. Yeah, we got that. That's all right. So Uligan Hart, he is pretty interesting. So sort of from a winemaking family, but didn't grow up in the winemaking culture. He has relatives that do it. He decided to pursue that. He impressed somebody that was very shocking, and that is Klaus-Peter Keller. Klaus-Peter Keller is one of the most iconic German winemakers ever. They do this really cool thing every year where they have this big, essentially like festival where all the winemakers bring their wine and people bid on it, and it's a big thing. And Klaus-Peter Keller's wine several times has been the most expensive wine ever on the planet. In fact, 2018, his like off-dry Riesling was the most expensive off-dry Riesling ever bought. And I work with his wines. His G Max, which is like his like flagship wine, we get 2 bottles in the state of Colorado, and we sell them each for $1,200 to $1,600 depending on the vintage, each bottle. And then it goes to a restaurant and gets marked up even more. So really crazy expensive wine. Well, Klaus-Peter Keller took Julian Hart under his wing, and Julian was his apprentice for a while. Klaus-Peter Keller is a little more south in the Rheinhessen, and Hart is from the Mosel. So he went back home after a while and started buying tiny parcels, just like saving up money, buying a parcel, saving up money, buying a parcel, so really small. He has been really deliberate with what he's bought, and he's bought some really exceptional land, and he makes just like awesome wine. And you will see Klaus-Peter Keller speaks very highly of him, and they post about each other all the time on social media. And it's really cool to like see their little like friendship, their bromance. But the great thing about Hart is he doesn't have the legacy yet of Keller, and so you're getting it at a really amazing prices, one, and also just being able to get it. I had someone recently texting me looking, hey, where can I find Keller in Denver? And I was like, good luck. It came out 3 months ago, it's all gone. And so you get to taste a very similar style. Though I will say, one of the things I appreciate about Hart that maybe is not seen in Keller's wine is because it's the Mosel, it's colder there. So you have a little bit more residual sugar, which is like the leftover sugar after like the yeast eats everything. And it adds this really like sultry texture to it. So this one definitely has a little more sweetness. The wild thing is that so like our first wine we had like 2.5 grams of residual sugar, which is quite low. This one has 40, which you would think is going to be like insanely sweet, but because the acid is so ripping, there's that balance. And that's what's like really awesome about German Riesling is there might be some sweetness to it, but it's like really like adds to the textural element. It adds to the whole flavor profile rather than just being like the thing that's shoved in your face. And I always say it's like you drink like a cold Coca-Cola and it's like refreshing, but when that Coke gets hot and flat and you drink it and there's not that balance, it's like really gross. And that's the difference between a Riesling that has acidity to balance it and Riesling that is just like some like sweet bomb, just like there. So I thought was a fun one to finish with. You get to see a range of drier styles. This one's sweeter, but drier styles and kind of what this grape can do. And there's so many amazing things happening in Germany now. If you like red wine, they have been making an incredible amount of red wine has been like planted in the last like 15 to 10 years. And it's all like light and fresh and high acid and just like great food wine, easy drinking, just sit on the patio. Yeah, I am drooling for spicy Thai food right now too. Yeah, this is really a fun one. What grades for red wine? They don't have the grades. I'm assuming you're talking about like how it's cabinet and so they don't do that for the red wine. That's really like a historic thing. It's interesting. You were like a very awesome winemaker. Like you were like the man, and I do mean the man because there's like almost no female winemakers in Germany. There's a couple, but not many. You were like awesome if you could produce sweet wine because it was so cold there historically. And I mean, sweet wine was really like the wine of the kings. It was the wine of royalty. It held longer before they understood how microbes affect wine. It was just like a flavor that really wasn't in the world that much, especially this part of the world where there wasn't sugar cane. So if you could make sweet wine, that was amazing. Now we're starting to see people's palates are like, yeah, that's great, but I want my wine to like go with my food and have some diversity. And so now we're kind of seeing this swing. But yeah. Oh, what grapes? Yes. Okay. So, of course, Pinot Noir is the most common grape that we probably here as a group know as a cold weather grape. Yes, Spätburgunder. Zweigelt is another one that we're starting to see all over the place. It's like a little more gritty, has the ability to be more tannic, and we're starting to see some producers making like, I don't want to say cab style because it doesn't have like the extraction, but it has like that robustness. Ulistein, the second wine we tasted, this is incredible. He ripped up some of his Riesling grapes that were closer to the water, like that's the warmer areas closer to the water. He felt like they were getting too ripe, and so he ripped those up and planted Cabernet Sauvignon, which is crazy. It's not a cold weather grape. It's like a kind of moderate temperature grape. And his bet is just like, things are going to keep getting warmer. I'm going to have old vine Cab Sauv, and no one else will in this area. So that's pretty exciting. Dornfelder is a grape that's been grown in Germany for a long time. It has generally been produced in a really horribly sweet way, like cherry, like real cherry pie in a glass. And now we're starting to see some producers like dial it back, and then it gets this like really beautiful fruity aroma without being like super heavy. Trollinger is another really cool grape. It's like almost like the Grenache of Germany. So it's got like really easy drinking, light, fresh, like pops of like fruit, pops of like pomegranates. You get like sweet and sour, and it's really cool. But there's so many exciting things happening right now in Germany. And it'll keep happening. We're starting to see this new wave of young producers that are doing things. And all these wines today are natural. They don't spray anything. And yeah, Jen, most people have never heard of these varietals, which is why it's hard to sell when I sell. I feel like I'm climbing up these steeps to like get people to notice, like, hey, Riesling's good and dry.
They have Pinot.
Yeah, they're always fun though. I guess the thing, German wine is never wildly inexpensive. Like I'd say it's about $20 and up. But you'll always get a really good food wine, which is nice. Yeah, that's the bane of, it's like Jura, like none of the wines are inexpensive, but they're delicious. Awesome. Any questions, thoughts? Was there a favorite among the 4 wines?
I feel badly that after tasting the last 3, the first one is not my favorite child. I feel badly about that.
My parents feel the same way about their firstborn, so it's cool.
Aww. I'm the only one, so.
You're the favorite.
I think we still like the first one the best.
Yeah, the first one's a real dazzler, and something that I love about that wine is it's like ready to drink right now. And then I think about the Weissakusa, the third one we tasted, and if you were to like lay that down, like that thing could just, in 20 years, it would just be like still amazing, and maybe have more developed flavors too, which is fun. But yeah, a lot of people will say like, oh, like only red wine is meant to be laid down. Riesling and Chenin Blanc are the 2 whites that will just live long and prosper. They're just great. And that's because of the acidity level.
You make much Chenin Blanc in Germany?
Does Germany make any Chenin Blanc at all?
They act, oh no, I thought it's a Chasselas. Not that I know of, but the day that I find one, I will scream it from the rooftops. My specialty is in the Loire Valley, and that is largely because of my obsession with Chenin Blanc. And I think it could actually, one of the similarities of Chenin and Riesling is that they have the ability to produce really high acid and really high sugar, 2 things that make them great for cold weather and also the longevity of their lifespan. And I wouldn't be surprised if some wine nerd just starts doing Chenin there. But there's so many varietals and so many little like parcels and people growing like things that I saw a Chasselas, which is typically a grape from Switzerland. And the only places I know in the world that it grows are Switzerland, and then one teeny tiny appellation in the Loire Valley, like way high up. The only places I've ever seen it, and I just saw one come out of Germany. So I had to grab a bottle. I haven't tasted it yet, but I think there's probably a lot of hidden treasures in Germany and a lot of things that'll start to come out in the next few years of people experimenting and just, and with the way the climate is going, with the way people are just becoming better farmers and understanding, like, especially with biodynamics, how to prune the vines better and do all these things, you're starting to just see everyone doing better with the grapes that they're growing.
Is Germany on that EU tariff?
Yes, unfortunately. So there was just a new set of tariffs that were applied 2 weeks ago, because restaurants aren't in enough pain. And they applied it to anything over 14% and then also sparkling. So I guess sparkling is the only thing that will apply to. I've never heard of a German wine over 14%. So yeah, now sparkling wine will have that at least for a little while. Yeah, I know. When they said initially the tariffs were going on anything under 14%, I was like, that is all of Germany. So yeah, but hopefully that will be gone soon. I don't know. We're working hard. Yeah, exactly. Working hard to get that gone. Awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed kind of playing around with some different Rieslings, maybe than that you've tried before, and definitely different producers than you've tried before. But this was really fun. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just gonna say, can you just mute yourself? Well, I just want to thank you guys. Do you guys have any other questions before we jump off? I want to, well, wish you guys all a happy new year. I meant to do that earlier. I'm sorry. And thank you guys for your support. I was just talking to Lauren earlier when she came in to pick up, and I was reminded that it was almost a year ago that she started supporting us when we got the initial shutdown, and she reached out and asked how she could help. And you guys have all been there since the day that we opened our doors. So it's just great to now call you guys not just guests, but now friends. So thank you. And, you know, and Charisse brought me treats for Christmas, and Brandon and Jess have been there since day one, having our block parties here. So I really appreciate having this intimate setting and having the opportunity for us to have the ability to just get together again. Just so you guys know, I think I told you guys all this when you came in individually, but I'm just trying to do everything I can to not get infected and to not infect any of you guys. So we're holding off. We're not going to reopen for indoor dining until next Friday at the earliest. If we do have guests in here, I can legally have you guys in here if you want to reach out to me. If you want to have a glass of wine, I know Charisse mentioned that she was going to have a glass of wine at one point. So it's not illegal, and I have no problem doing that. But I'm not taking any reservations right now. So it's more of like prohibition style, like speakeasy style, where it's more, you know, just us hanging out. So yeah, so if you want to come in and you can't find a reservation, it's because I turned them off. So just text me or send me a message on Instagram, and we're going to still have our same hours. So 4 to 8, if you guys want to come in and have a glass of wine with me, love to have you. But the general public, we are not going to be inviting them in for a little bit longer. It's one of the benefits of being club members, right? Being able to do these bougie tastings with our experts, and also just come in and feel safe without a ton of people around you. So love to have you guys come in. And again, thank you for supporting us over the months, the days, the weeks, and now Lauren, literally almost a year. So do you guys have anything else before we jump off the Zoom? Well, you guys, I appreciate you so much, and can't wait to welcome you in, and can't wait to give literal hugs instead of just, you know, elbow bumps and stupid crap like that. But
thank you,
be
ladies.
safe.
It was awesome.
I'm glad you guys liked it, and thank you guys for being pioneers and being open to trying Riesling, and you know, which is such a wine that I've literally, since the day I opened, wanted to. I mean, you guys know you're in the business, so it's not really fair, but wanting to share that Riesling isn't all crap, and it's not all sweet, and it's one of the best and most versatile wines on the planet. So thank you guys for being here tonight, and look forward to seeing you in the next days and weeks. Love you guys. And thank you, Chess. Appreciate you so much. Thank you guys. Bye.